On March 13, 2013, Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio of Buenos Aires, Argentina, was elected the 266th Pope, following the unprecedented resignation of Pope Benedict XVI. Cardinal Bergoglio took the name Pope Francis. From the very beginning, Pope Francis was considered a mixed bag by reporters and commentators who followed the progress of the conclave. However, in these times of crisis and radical change, this papacy was anticipated with great promise and hope. This morning, the Voice of Catholic Tradition is pleased to broadcast an in-depth interview with Mr. John Vennari, editor of the Catholic Family News, who gives insightful analysis of the actions and statements of Pope Francis, which have consistently baffled and stunned the Catholic and secular world. Mr. Vennari and host Joe Bagnoli discuss the mindset of Jorge Bergoglio, which gives insight into this papacy riddled with controversial statements which appear to trivialize tradition and validate liberal beliefs contrary to solid Orthodox Catholic teaching. With only 6 months into this papacy, it is becoming painfully clear that Pope Francis is not the son of the Church, but a true son of Vatican II. Please listen carefully to this thought-provoking and revealing interview.
Good morning, John.
Good morning, Joe.
Welcome back to the Voice of Catholic Tradition.
Well, it's always good to be here.
Thank you very much. No news here, John. We have a new Pope, Pope Francis, and in less than a year, he's received international attention by his public statements through interviews and other sources. Let's call some of his comments controversial, shocking, and at best confusing. And I'd like to open the show. I want to get your impression. How would you, we're getting all sorts of things from the press, television, all over. How would you paint a picture of this Pope as you see him and as you've known him and studied him in the past?
Well, let me put it this way. I was in Rome for the conclave, and I was there. I was in St. Peter's Square when his name was announced and he first came out. And when his name was announced, I had never really heard of him before. So I immediately did research on him, and the research that I found brought me up against a black dread of what was to come, because we know that the trajectory of who the priest, bishop, cardinal was before he was Pope always launches into how he acts and the things he does and the things he says as Pope. There was, that miraculous conversion of Pius IX, who was liberal at the beginning, but he did change. But he's the only one. John the 23rd was progressive beforehand, and he ran a progressive papacy. Conservative, according to today's standards.
Yes.
Paul VI, same thing. John Paul II, same thing. Pope Benedict, the man he was, this kind of man with a conservative heart and a modernist mind, that's what his papacy was. And so, and I posted things about the crazy liturgies that he was presiding over, the youth things with the rock and roll and the dancing that he did in Buenos Aires, the fact that he knelt before a Protestant to receive a blessing at a charismatic thing as a Protestant and a Catholic priest, and then he boasted about it in his book that this was a fine thing to do, to kneel before a Protestant and therefore trumpet the era of religious indifferentism. I posted about that. I posted about the fact that he celebrated Hanukkah just last December 2012 in Buenos Aires, celebrated a ritual of the modern Jewish religion, and he was wearing the skull cap and all of that business. And, people said to me, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. It's too much bad news. Give him a chance. And and my response is, look, if this man was conservative, if this man had a history of saying the Tridentine Mass, sticking up for Thomistic philosophy and theology, and I posted that, you would never say, oh, give him a chance, let's see if he's going to be liberal.
Right.
You would say, hey, this is great news. This is very promising. And so I'm only looking to be realistic. Just be realistic and look at Cardinal Bergoglio. He is a bit of a mixed bag because he has these traditional devotions to Our Lady. He's consecrating his pontificate to Our Lady of Fatima. On October 13th, he's going to consecrate the world to Our Lady of Fatima. So he's got that side of him, and, you know, I kind of take a certain comfort or hope in the fact that this is what's going to save him in the end. But in pretty much everything, you know, in so much else of what we see, we really get the sense of a man who is embroiled in the modernist Vatican II revolution.
Yes, there's no doubt about that, and I think he's made it quite clear also, John, that since Vatican II, the progress has not been suitable. He believes they have fallen short, and he wants to go much, much further. So he's even highly critical of what you and I and most traditional Catholics consider 50 years of disaster.
Yes, that it hasn't gone far enough.
Yeah.
I think what we're going to see with him is one aspect we're going to see is that, you know, Paul VI brought the ecumenical and the dimension of religious liberty. You know, he took it so far. It was under Paul VI, of course, where Catholic states were getting letters from the Vatican saying, remove any reference to Catholicism from your constitutions and become a completely secular state.
Yes.
You know, what did we have there? We had the traditionalists cringing, and we had Freemasons cheering, as they cheer ecumenism, because ecumenism is basically a Masonic orientation. We have the Freemasons themselves saying that ecumenism is the stepchild of Freemasonry, because indirectly or directly, however it's practiced, it places all religions on the same level. So Paul VI did that. John Paul II, then, he was actually a true leader, because he saw the direction he wanted to take the church, and he took it there with cardinals and, you know, Vatican cardinals and advisors kicking and screaming. He was advised not to do the pan-religious meeting of Assisi. He was advised not to do, and they were begging him not to do the apology program. I remember seeing a video where he talked about men telling him, do not go to Canterbury and pray with the Archbishop of the Archlayman, rather, of the Anglican Church. Don't do it. And he said, no, I will do it. He was a leader, but he was traveling in the orientation of Vatican II, and he was pushing very much the concept of ecumenism, the concept of religious liberty, very much pushing that way forward. Along comes Pope Benedict, and he was what you would call, what Pope St. Pius X would call, the conserving force within modernism. We know that the modernism has two forces, the progressive force that charges ahead, and then the conserving force that pulls back a little bit, or does a two-step forward and one step backwards type of approach. And that was more Pope Benedict, that, as I said, he had that conservative heart and a modernist mind, and he at least did declare that the Tridentine Mass was never forbidden. Okay, now we have Pope Francis, and we have another Arditi, which is Italian for hothead, charge ahead, and I think what we're going to see with him is primarily the aspect of collegiality promoted, the more synod approach, the more committee approach. And I mean, if you want to know anything about, you know, bureaucracy and committees, just watch Yes, Prime Minister for for a satire of how disastrous that can be. And it's not the structure of the church that our Lord established, which is most important. So we're going to see a very strong collegial aspect, a very strong sense of synods and things like that. And we're going to see other aspects of, liberal aspects of the council pushed forward, always, I think, elevating the human element to the detriment of the supernatural element.
Right. I think there's no doubt about that. For anyone to say that this Pope is not clear in his intent, I don't think they're just paying attention. Because if you look at I don't want to use the word idols, but I will. The people he looks to most: Henri de Lubac, Michel de Cousteau. If I'm not mistaken, that essentially they reject the necessary ecclesial logical link. They reject the idea that there's continuity between the present beliefs and the explicit faith of the first centuries. And I think this comes up, John. It didn't take us long for us to understand his position on traditional Catholics.
No. It's very interesting to me. Well, did you want to finish your thought there?
I just want to say that, his mockingly referring to us as Pelagians, Restorationists, Legalists, people who, quote, exaggerated doctrinal security and who stubbornly try to recover a past that doesn't exist. These are very strong words.
Well, they are strong words. And what is it, Joe? You and I lived through it in the 60s and the 70s.
Yes, we did.
It's all familiar. We've seen all of this before. The pompous, arrogant mocking of sacred tradition, of everything that we hold dear. This is what we got in the 60s, this is what we got in the 70s, and this is what we are getting from Pope Francis. And it's nothing to be proud of, and it's nothing to try to defend. And this is what we're up against here. Take a look at the overall pattern of what he does. Okay, just take a look. Practically everything he has done so far, especially in this, dealing with the press, and just going straight to the press, bypassing the encyclicals, bypassing using apostolic letters, bypassing using motu proprios, bypassing using the normal structures. Okay? He's just discarding the normal structures. The term I coined is Pope Francis is too humble to follow the rules. He's too humble to follow the rules.
Right.
And so, but these, so he gives these statements to the press that are causing, as you said, confusion, disorientation. They are not clear. They are very sloppy. And Catholics end up fighting one another as a result. Did he mean that? He couldn't have meant that. And even, the petulancy of the National Catholic Register, who just tried to defend everything he says, and the people like us who recognize the reality of the problem, they call us Pope haters.
Absolutely.
That's the terminology. I'm sorry, National Catholic Register. That's the tactic of homosexuals.
Right.
Homosexuals call you a hater, and the National Catholic Register has debased themselves to that level, making a personal attack. Well, they call us Pope haters. We don't hate the Pope. We don't hate anyone. We love the truths of the faith. But the point I wanted to make is that these things that have really caused controversy, they all have one major point in common. They please, what he says, pleases liberal Catholics, pleases a world that has no love of Catholicism, and causes consternation to conservative and traditional Catholics. These things that he has said, they all have that in common. It pleases the world's press. The world's press is pleased with Francis's remark, not good. Barack Obama has publicly said that he loves St. Pope Francis, and especially the fact that Pope Francis said that the Church shouldn't obsess over abortion, contraception, and homosexuality. Obama, I have great admiration for Pope Francis in this regard. The most pagan, pro-abortion, pro-homosexual president in history is praising Pope Francis. Not good. The NARAL, the pro-abortion group, they posted a public thank you. Dear Pope Francis, thank you from the pro-choice women everywhere. Pro-choice, of course, meaning pro-abortion.
Yes.
Not good. You'll notice that this is the exact same formula that came from the Vatican II revolution. The Vatican II revolutions from the very beginning, especially when it was clear that all these changes in the Church are going to happened? What did it? It pleased liberal Catholics. It pleased the world, who has no love of Catholicism. And it caused consternation for traditional and conservative Catholics.
Right.
It's the exact same pattern. What we are seeing with Pope Francis is we are once again, and this is what I'm going to be writing about in the next issue of Catholic Family News, so listeners, sign up and get it.
Forget.
Is that with Pope Francis, we have to be somewhat grateful because he is finally once again showing us the true face of the revolution. Over the past 40 years, we've been lulled into this kind of complacency, even with John Paul II, little by little, doing these progressive things. People would get used to them. People would, and then with Pope Benedict, you had that conservative veneer pulled down like a shade over top of the revolution, even though the revolution was still there and moving forward. John Paul II visited one synagogue. Pope Benedict, in 26 years, Pope Benedict visited 3.
Right.
Okay, it was still moving forward, and now the mask is torn off, and we're seeing the revolution as it really is, and it's having the same exact effect. It pleases liberal Catholics. Hans Kung loves Pope Francis. It pleases the world that has no love of Catholicism. Obama and pro-abortion women saying thank you, Pope Francis, and it causes consternation to conservative Catholics and traditional Catholics.
Well, I guess you can then. The old saying, you can judge a person by the friends they keep. And here it is. And here it is blatant. And then there are statements. I just wanted. There's so much in front of me, and I know there's so much in front of you, John. This one quote here. Religion has the right to express its opinion in the service of the people, but God in creation has set us free. It is not possible to interfere spiritually in the life of a person. That's coming from the Pope.
Okay, if I was teaching freshman high school and someone wrote that as an answer to a question, I would fail him.
Yeah.
I would fail the 13-year-old.
Yes.
Who should know better. I don't have that. See, I'll tell you a lot of things about Pope Francis, and that is a number of things in what he says, if he would finish the thought, might be able to be giving a traditional definition. If he would finish and clarify, but he makes these statements and leaves them as is.
Yes.
For example, I'm probably going to ask you to read that quote again to me because I don't have it in front of me, but where he said elsewhere that each of us has, everyone has his own idea of good and evil and must choose to follow the good and fight evil as he conceives them.
He said that.
And the world, that would be enough to make the world a better place. Okay, he stops there.
Right.
And it was in the context of him talking to an atheist, a fallen-away Catholic atheist, Scarfali from La Repubblica. That was the interview from last week around October 1st, where the Scarfali was praising him that the Pope has talked about the supremacy of the individual conscience.
Right.
This is deadly. Again, it takes us back to the 70s. It takes us back to Karen, to Father Karen, and Father Richard McCormick, and Father Richard McBrien, talking about the supremacy of conscience. And when I say he doesn't finish the thought, what he leaves out makes all the difference.
Makes all the difference.
He does never say that the Catholic is duty-bound to form a correct conscience according to the principles of natural law, according to the principles of divine law, according to the principles of the Ten Commandments. You can't, just try having a basketball game where everybody follows their own rules.
Right.
Because the end justifies the means and I want to win. There'd be an outcry. There'd be a greater outcry. There's a greater outcry about not obeying the rules of sports than there is of not obeying the rules of God.
Oh, absolutely. And I will read that back to you again because there's one little part in here, John. I quote, religion has the right to express its opinion in the service of the people. And this part here, but God in creation has set us free. What does that mean?
Well, that is a statement. First of all, it is part of the Vatican II revolution, the beginning of it. This new notion that of religion at the service of the people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what that's done is it's taking the two great commandments, it's cut off the first one and elevated the second. Our Lord was asked, what's the greatest commandment? He said, love the Lord thy God with thy whole heart, thy whole mind, thy whole soul, and thy whole strength. And secondly, love thy neighbor as thyself. Okay? Then this new approach, religion at the service of the people, cuts off not specifically, but in a practical order, it cuts off that duty to love the Lord thy God first with thy whole heart, thy whole mind, thy whole soul, and thy whole conscience. And how do we love God? Christ said, what? If you love me, keep my commandments. And in order to keep the commandments and live them, again, we're back to what I said earlier, we have to form a Catholic conscience. We have to form a conscience because the duty of conscience is to be prescriptive, directive, here and now decision on the rightness and wrongness of the act. It is the last practical judgment that we make before we commit an act. This is good here and now, should be done by me. This is wrong here and now, should be avoided by me. And I am able to form that judgment because I have formed a Catholic conscience based on natural law, divine law, the Ten Commandments, the whole bit. Okay? That's all just not talked about, and that is crucial, especially now in a time of moral relativism. He is feeding the flames of the greatest errors of the time by this.
Right. And right here, he says, when does a formulation or doctrine of thought cease to be valid? When it loses sight, here we go, just as you said, when it loses sight of the human, or even when it is afraid of the human or deluded about itself. Again, the human. And he's feeding this frenzy out there that has always existed, that the Catholic Church does not take into reality what humans are going through.
Good grief. Get everybody who's listening, get hold of a book called The 13th, The Greatest of Centuries, because you will see in that book the way the Church is the master and the great mother of taking care of humanity. Take the founding of hospitals. Where did that come from? The founding of orphanages, the founding of places for unwed mothers. All these things. I mean, back in the medieval times, the 13th century, the hospitals would be run by religious orders. And you know something? When it came to mealtime, the religious, the nuns or whoever was there, the brothers, whatever, I don't know exactly, but anyway, they would eat last. They would eat if there was enough food and make sure that the patients got their food. Can you imagine trying to approach the nurses' union with that with that type of directive?
Right.
There'd be an outcry. And yet the church that did all this selfless work for their fellow man, out of the love of God, not out of the love of man first, but loving God first, and then loving man. The love of man is the overflow of our love of God to His creation.
Result of that, correct.
And that was the problem. Again, we're seeing Vatican II all over again. Up to now, all you stupid Catholics have got it wrong, and we have got it right. And you just take your counting your rosaries and take your triumphalism and shove it in the closet where it belongs, and let us run things based on surely the needs of humanity. Now he might not be saying something that crass, but that's certainly the direction that we see.
Oh, absolutely. It's out there, and he is constantly feeding those out there who want to use what the Pope says, and you made a very good point that he doesn't by what he does not say is extremely important. And
it's everything.
And there's someone that wrote in the American Spectator, George Neumeyer.
Yeah, he's pretty. Yeah, he's called the shots right from the beginning.
He says, I love what he said. He says, none of this repositioning will take place at the level of official teaching. In other words, he's going to stay away from doctrine. No one's going to say he's flirting with doctrine. Well, we wonder. None of this repositioning will take place at the level of official teaching. But this is what scares me, John. At the murkier levels of tone, emphasis, and appointment.
Yeah, well, but we know, too, this is how modernism works. This is how modernism worked from the beginning. That's why I get a little impatient with people who look at Vatican II documents and say, that's orthodox, we can accept it, that seems to be heretical, we won't accept it. Modernists seldom speak outright heresy.
Correct.
But it is the whole framework. I just saw this wonderful thing it was probably a college student, and he made a teaser for The Sound of Music, the way you would see in the theaters, upcoming. And he took everything, the way he sees from The Sound of Music, and he framed it as if it was, he framed it as a horror story. The way it's very funny, very clever the way it's done.
I've not seen that.
You would think Sound of Music is a horror movie, the way he set it up. And that's a lot of what they do, is they frame everything differently.
Correct.
They distort reality by the way they frame it, but what they choose to emphasize, and as we said earlier, what they fail to affirm. For example, I don't know that you'll find in Vatican II that there is salvation outside the Catholic Church, but in Vatican II, the decree on ecumenism, the Presbyterian observer, he rejoiced that nowhere in there will you see the affirmation that there is no salvation outside the Catholic Church. They just don't talk about it.
Exactly.
And this is how they operate. That's why it's a mistake to just take what I would call kind of a rabbinical approach. Well, this is orthodox, this is savors of heresy, this is heresy. It's much bigger than that. The modernist orthodox by overwhelming you with an orientation and with an atmosphere. And this is what we see happening here, I think.
Oh, I think so. I absolutely think so. And Neumeyer also said in an article written that he entitled "When Paul Corrected Peter," he said, "This is what Let us not forget that the Pope is a liberal Jesuit. Okay."
Yeah, that's for sure.
People just don't discuss that. He said, just look at the U.S. Congress. It is overflowing with Jesuit graduates who have abandoned the faith and support abortion and gay rights. Oh, so pastoral Jesuits, heal thyself. Now, talk about enabling not only those who are not Catholic, who have been looking for an easier moral structure all along, but those people who do call them Catholics. How do we go with this now? Where does this stop? How much power is he now giving out across the board to all of these people? How much damage will be done here, John?
Well, a tremendous amount, because when he made that statement in America Magazine, it was an incredible statement where he talked about the church obsessing.
Yes.
the church obsessing over abortion, homosexuality, and contraception. Here he says, we cannot insist only on issues related to abortion, gay marriage, and the use of contraceptive methods. Ellipsis, the church's pastoral ministry cannot be obsessed with the transmission of disjointed multitude of doctrines to be imposed insistently. Again, if I was teaching high school and a high school freshman wrote that, he would fail.
You know why I fail him?
I mean, it is wrong on so many levels.
Well, it's wrong.
First of all, what does it do? As Pope, first of all, I'm still looking for bishops who obsess over these things. Do you know of any?
John, all I know is that they had to hold workshops for parish priests in order to encourage them to even discuss abortion from the pulpit.
Right, yeah. Timothy Dolan, Cardinal O'Malley.
Right.
These people that we have, I don't see them obsessing. I mean, Timothy Dolan left town when they were discussing. He was on the other side of the country when they were passing the so-called gay marriage legislation.
That's right.
He left completely. Even the New York Times said if anybody could stop this, the Catholic Church would, and they ran from the fight. New York Times said that, and they were correct. Where is this obsession? I'd love to see it. But what that statement does is it gives these Vatican II bishops who did practically nothing anyway, this gives them the quote-unquote justification now to do absolutely nothing.
Nothing, right.
Or even, next to nothing.
No.
Then the amazing thing I see, and it shows, I really think, he has to, he was studying with the Jesuits in the 60s. The people I know who studied with the Jesuits in the 60s and 70s either lost their faith or came very near losing their faith or ended up to be progressive Obama Catholics.
Correct.
That is what the Jesuits are giving now. In fact, I don't know if you know it or not, but the problem of homosexuality in the Jesuits is so great. Do you know what the nickname of Jesuit presidents are? Priest presidents?
No, I don't.
The gallery owners.
Oh, boy.
The gallery owners. There's very strong, and so the Jesuits are gone. They're gone. When I heard that a Jesuit pope had been elected, again, it was just this black dread. But I want to return to this one thing where he talks about abortion, gay marriage, and the use of contraceptives. And he gives the impression, again, because he's sloppy in these things, he uses a term, a disjointed multitude of doctrine. Joe, abortion, homosexuality, contraception are not disjointed. They all flow from the same moral principle that it is never lawful to exercise an act and reject the end for which the act is designed. That's what contraception does. If I would go to your house and you would give me a meal, and I love pasta and sausage, and this is really good, and I spit it out. I take another bite and spit it out. Would you invite me to your house again?
Hardly.
No. Why? Because the act is grotesque. Because I have rejected the purpose of eating, which is to swallow and provide nutrition so I can live. So it's the one principle. It's never lawful to exercise an act and reject the end for which the act is designed. That's the problem with contraception. That's the problem with abortion. That is the problem with homosexuality. It is one principle. It is not disjointed at all.
Well, there was quite a reaction to that statement. It's coming from across the board. And it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that the Vicar of Christ would make that statement.
Yeah, any Catholic, let alone.
Yes, any Catholic. And that's the next point I want to get to. Here's a quote from Pope Francis. And I'm going to ask you a serious question based on this. Quote, unquote, do you need to convince the other to become Catholic? No. Go out and meet him. He's your brother. This is enough. Go out and help him, and Jesus will do the rest. Now, let me ask you. Statements such as this and other statements we've discussed made prior to the Second Vatican Council, how would they have been treated in the Catholic world?
Well, if he wrote that in a book, the book would have been placed on the index of forbidden books.
Absolutely, and it is not allowed.
It would have been placed on the index. If he said it publicly, he would have at least been called before Pius XII's Cardinal Ottaviani's Holy Office and said, what are you doing? And he either would have had to correct it, or, as what happened with John Courtney Mary, he would be silenced. Mm-hmm. And also probably not allowed to teach in any institution whatsoever, not even Catholic kindergarten.
Absolutely. And this is what we are now living with on a day-to-day basis.
And if anyone thinks that we're being too hard, I want to give a quote from a very prestigious Catholic moral theologian named Germain Grisey. He's a layman. I remember Monsignor William Smith, who is a professor of moral theology at Dunwoody Seminary. He really held Germain Grisey in high regard. He called him a card-carrying heavy. Okay, not card-carrying communist, but as far as he's not a communist, card-carrying, really super qualified moral theologian. Okay, he had high respect for him. And what's happened with this Pope Francis revolution is that so-called conservative Catholics, people like Janet Smith, people like Steubenville graduates, are now piping up and saying, well, wait a minute, something's wrong here. And this is causing confusion, and these statements don't have to be taken as things that we have to which we owe assent. But listen to what Germain Grisey says. Now again, this is a man I have never seen distance himself, second guess, or criticize a pope before. Here's what he says. He says, quote, "I'm afraid that Pope Francis has failed to consider carefully enough the likely consequences of letting loose with his thoughts in a world that will applaud being provided with such help in subverting the truth that it is his job to guard as inviolable and proclaim with fidelity. For a long time he has been thinking these things. Now he can say them to the world." And now this is him speaking, Germain Grisey speaking, "and he is self-indulgent enough to take advantage of the opportunity with as little care as he might unburden himself with friends after a good dinner and plenty of wine." Close quote.
Wow, powerful.
Grisey is saying this man talks like someone who is not sober.
Right.
After plenty of wine. Very dignified way of putting it.
Absolutely. And
nice language. I tip my hat to him. But the point is that people who never thought of second-guessing the Pope are now forced to consider we can't assent to this, and we have to resist it.
Absolutely, and for everyone that is coming around and starting to question, there are many, many, many others, unfortunately, within the church and outside as well, who are treating papal opinion, as doctrine, or nearly doctrine. And I'd like to quote something here, John, from a book written back prior to Vatican II by Father Hurley. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, he says, what is meant by the infallibility of the Pope? Now, by infallibility, we simply mean this. The Church believes that when he, its head, speaking as its supreme pastor and chief shepherd, is defining a doctrine of faith and morals to be held by the entire Church, he is protected from error. Now, by quote-unquote defining a doctrine, it is simply meant to make a public declaration of what the Church believes, not of any new teachings, because this cannot be. The deposit of faith was closed with the death of the apostles. After that, nothing would be added nor taken away. Hence, to define a doctrine is simply a public declaration of what has always been the teaching of the Church.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, that's it. We see in Vatican I that Catholics are bound, now this is a dogmatic definition, a dogmatic statement, that Catholics are bound to hold to the Catholic faith, and this is the term they use, in the same meaning and in the same explanation as the Church always taught. The oath against modernism picked that up, where the priest taking the oath would swear that he would reject the idea that doctrine can change over time, and that he will hold to the faith taught in the same meaning and in the same explanation as the Church always taught. That terminology, the same meaning and the same explanation, Vatican I didn't invent that. That goes all the way back to St. Vincent of Lawrence in the 4th century, who lived at a time of doctrinal instability and talked about the fact that in order to keep our balance, we keep to the Catholic faith in the same meaning and in the same explanation as the Church always taught. Now, that is the true definition of tradition. That is what we are bound to, and that is, as we said earlier, something we never hear repeated from any of the post-conciliar popes. Tell me when you heard Paul VI tell us that we are bound to keep the faith in the same meaning and in the same explanation, or when you heard John Paul II say that we're bound to keep the faith in the same meaning and the same explanation, or Pope Benedict XVI. What he did is he came up with a new definition of tradition, this so-called hermeneutic of continuity, and he refused ever to use the term accepting the faith in the same meaning and in the same explanation, and that is because if he did that and said that, the first thing he'd have to throw away is Vatican II's ecumenism and Vatican II's religious liberty. And now we have Pope Francis on the same trajectory, but at much higher velocity.
Right. Absolutely, because most post-Vatican II Catholics have been totally desensitized by constant change. They don't even know that things are changing.
Right.
And that's frightful. That's absolutely frightful. And
I mean, one of the good parts of this revolution, as far as making it visible to us, is the fact that he's going directly to the press. And secondly, if we think about it, the Vatican II revolution took place prior to the age of the Internet. Where people were not getting information right away,
right,
and people were not responding right away.
Very good point. Very good.
And so now we've got this, and so I mean, I am seeing things. I am seeing shock, consternation, all of these things. I'm seeing this from dedicated Catholics, as I said, who never thought of questioning the Pope before.
Absolutely.
Now they're finally realizing what the true doctrine of the papacy means. It doesn't mean that he can just say anything he wants, and we have to go along with it. It's never been papal teaching. What was it? I think Father Hess talked about a pope in the 6th century who was going to change one word of the canon, and the people in Rome just rose up in defiance and basically said, "Who do you think you are?"
One word. Well, we're running over here, John, but this has been wonderful, and we have to pray for the Pope. We definitely have to pray for
We do. Fatima says, pray a great deal for the Holy Father. And, a lot of the things in Fatima are indirect prophecies. I think at the time, the people, and maybe even the seers, well, they had the third secret, so they would know a little more, but the people of the time just figured, we'll pray for the Pope because he's going to be persecuted. Yeah, he's going to be persecuted, but also, I think now we can understand, or we can put forward the idea that when Our Lady said pray a great deal for the Holy Father, it's because the crisis of faith is ultimately going to come from the Holy Father.
Yes, absolutely. And many people don't know that she made that statement. Absolutely. We have to understand the Pope is cunning. Pope Francis is cunning and shrewd. He is not stupid. I've heard some references, well, he's just careless or stupid. No, he's not. He's not stupid or careless or out of control. But he is, as you pointed out very clearly, and I thank you for this, John, he is totally dedicated to the reform movement of Vatican II, which he believes has not gone far enough.
Yeah, what we're going to see is we're going to. I think if something doesn't stop this, we're going to see the same sort of radical things happening now that we did in the 60s and 70s.
Absolutely. Yes, it's going to be
with this type of speed and this type of aggressiveness.
Well, we'll keep praying, John. Pray for the Pope, pray for our church, pray for tradition.
Yes, and keep the faith. And don't be disturbed.
No, not at all.
Don't be disturbed, because when our Lord said, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith, he's telling us really that the faith is going to be very much dwindled. And how is it going to be dwindled if the hierarchy is strong? I think, again, this is a personal opinion, take it for what it's worth, that is also a kind of indirect prophecy that the hierarchy itself is going to fail us.
Yes.
And we're going to have to keep to the faith, go to the old catechisms, go to the old books, the pre-Vatican II books, and you will find, as I did when I was looking for answers in the 70s, that the doctrine and the morals that you find in the pre-Vatican II manuals tally with your Catholic sense and tally with common sense and tally with a basic notion of Catholic piety. It doesn't jar you out of it the way the modern teaching does.
Right, and we have to thank God for our ability to keep arguing these points. We are not being disrespectful, but we must treat a situation as it is presented to us. And John, thank you very much. Thank you for what you've done, and we'll speak to you again.
One thing I will say, too, I'd ask people to get the Catholic Family News. You can go to the Catholic Family News website to subscribe, www.cfnews.org, and send me an email if you like.
Okay, fine. But we'll put that in our closing statement also, John.
Great.
The Voice of Catholic Tradition is most grateful to Mr. John Vennari for taking the time from his busy schedule for this very important and heartfelt interview. Since the Second Vatican Council, the Holy Catholic Church has been suffering a severe crisis, evidenced by the destruction of her churches, schools, and institutions, loss of priestly vocations, and diluted faith in the clergy and laity throughout the entire Catholic world. During this time of unprecedented devastation, our Church cries out for a vicar of Christ who will, with a firm hand, steer the bark of Peter on a steady course back to her traditions of 2,000 years and toward the reign of Christ the King. Our Holy Father is in need of much prayer. We encourage our listeners to visit John Vennari's website, www.cfnews.org, and subscribe to Catholic Family News, where you will be enlightened, educated, and inspired. Our Lady of Fatima, pray for our Holy Father. Pray for our Church. Pray for us.